What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. There have been a lot of talks about different Raptors players this season, from Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet to OG and Scotty, but not a lot of people. In fact, very few people have actually been talking about him this season, given the fact that a lot of negative talk was about this player last season, and that is a player who I'm going to nickname the Silent Assassin. And yes, that's Malachi Flynn. I'm going to be talking about his offensive game this year, some of the improvements that I've seen. I'm also going to be touching on his defensive game as well. So if you're ready to watch this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button, guys. We're super close to 4,000 subscribers. Your support would be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, as you guys know, I do like to give out shout outs on my channel. And for today's video, the shout out goes out to Gregory. So Gregory, thank you so much for supporting the channel through your likes and comments. It is very much appreciated. Now let's talk about Malachi Flynn, because he's taken a big jump this year, and it seems like no one has talked about him. He's made some strides to his offensive game, which is what we're going to start with. Obviously, he's looked like a much polished and a much better offensive player than he did last year. So let's quickly touch upon his stats this year. Now, so far this year, Malachi Flynn is averaging 7.4 points, 1.2 assists, 1.6 rebounds, which isn't really impressive, but you also have to take into consideration that he's only playing 12.3 minutes a game, and he's not playing every single game. And also taking into consideration, his shooting has improved so much this year. You see, for most point guards, they're usually shooting in the low 40%, but Malachi Flynn, in limited minutes, he's shooting 47.2%. He's also shooting an incredible 48.3% from the three-point line, and he's a good shooter, which means that he's obviously going to be hitting his free throws as well, and he's doing so at 90.9% this season. So obviously he's improved in a lot of different areas. Now, obviously, most people looking at those statistics will say, what's the big deal? His statistics don't really jump out. Those are minimal statistics. But given the season that he had last season, where he saw not a lot of playing time, a lot of inconsistent minutes, and although he's still not seeing as much playing time as I would prefer him to be playing, he still has made sure that he's improved in his at least one part of the game that he's really good at, which is his offensive game. Now, one of the biggest areas he has improved in this season has been his three-point shooting and just his overall shooting game. He's also been a little bit more patient, but I want to present this stat here. When you take a look at the Raptors roster and catch and shoot threes, you see where Malachi Flynn ranks second on this team. Technically, he should be first. Cam Birch is shooting 100%. That's probably because he's taken 1 3 a game, but Malachi Flynn is shooting 52.9% in catch and shoot threes. Now, this is big because Raptors, as we know, outside of their starting five, their bench really isn't that great at not only scoring points, but that's obviously because Nick Nurse isn't giving them minutes. But aside from that, they really struggled in three-point shooting last year. But this year it has been the complete opposite. And Malachi Flynn has been one of the biggest reasons why, along with Chris Boucher. But Malachi Flynn has done a tremendous job of catch and shoot three-pointers. You're seeing it every time he's playing with starters. You're seeing it when he's playing off of the bench with some of the other bench guys as well. But this is so important because the Raptors not only need shooters, they need shooters around Pascal, Scotty, and taking into consideration that Precious, although we obviously expect him to take a step forward in his three-point shooting, we obviously have guys like Precious. We have guys like Christian Koloko who aren't really good three-point shooters. So the main thing you need to do is surround your centers and power forwards with shooters, and obviously Malachi Flynn has been doing an excellent job of that. And not only that, when you take a look at the Raptors roster as a whole, and you take a look at the offensive rating, which is such a good statistic to kind of highlight how players produce offensively, you see where Malachi Flynn ranks. He ranks 5th on the team. Again, he technically should be 4th because Justin Champagnie has played like 9 minutes the entire season. So obviously his offensive rating is a little bit flirted up there, but Malachi Flynn is ahead of a lot of the guys that you see on the list there. Now, that's obviously not to indicate that he's a better offensive player than them, but he's someone who's coming in limited minutes and producing very well. And in fact, his offensive game is such a surplus that it's actually making up for some of his defensive limitations. When you take a look at box plus minus, again, a box plus minus of 1.3 may not seem like a lot, but when you take a look at some of the guys that he's ahead of on the list, this just tells you what a phenomenal job he's been doing on the offensive side. I think one of the major key to improving his offense has also been that he's understanding his role. Last year, it was unfortunate because Nick Nurse was playing him not only limited minutes, very inconsistent minutes. So he'd come in for 2 minutes, he makes a mistake, and he's pulled out. Whereas this year, he at least knows he's going to be playing a little bit more because of injuries and also because he's a vote of confidence from Nick Nurse in certain games, but also because he's not rushing his shots. It seemed like last year he was a little bit nervous. Obviously, sophomore slump is a thing, and I told you guys that last year, but Malachi Flynn has finally been understanding that, you know what, he can play through some of his mistakes and Nick Nurse won't be punishing him necessarily as much as he was last year. And he's a little bit more comfortable. You see it on the offensive side. When the shot isn't there, He'll pass it. He'll make some nice passes as well. Although his passing is a little bit underappreciated, and it's not going to necessarily show up on the stat sheet. You know he's a smart shooter when he knows when he has bigger guys on him not to shoot over them. He makes the right shot selections, and that's the biggest part. And I think the most important thing to Malachi Flynn's development offensively has been, especially when he's playing with some of the starters like Scottie Barnes and Pascal Siakam, he's not forcing his game. He's understanding his role. He's letting guys like Pascal and Scottie handle the ball. He's playing away. He's spacing the floor a little bit, which is great, and obviously helps guys like Pascal and Scottie who love to attack the interior as well. So again, that's been one of the surpluses of his offensive game, but I do want to talk about his defensive game as well. Now, the biggest question with a lot of fans has been, he's not 6'8", he's 6'9". Now, obviously, taking a look at his defensive rating, people are going to be quick to point out that he ranks near the end of the roster in defensive rating, but I do want to point out the fact that I think he also is one of those statistics, again, offensive rating as well, but defensive rating as well. I think it's one of those statistics that it's a little bit skewed in the way that, let's pretend for a moment, if Malachi Flynn were to play with Christian Koloko, as you see, his defensive rating is phenomenal, as opposed to someone like Juancho Hernan Gomez, you'd obviously make a huge difference on how well you're playing and how many points you're allowing. So I think those are just some of the few differences, as you see with defensive ratings, but also just understanding that it's who you playing with, and also the minutes you're playing against. Sometimes it's garbage minutes and the other team goes on a 5-0 run to end the game, and obviously you're -5 from there. So it's just those little things that a lot of people don't take into consideration. This is not defending Malachi Flynn in any way, shape, or form. He definitely has his limitations, not because of his height, but also just because of his size as well. He's not the biggest guy. He's around 175 pounds, I believe, which isn't a lot. Let's be honest. In a league where a lot of the guys are 6'6", 6'7 plus, 210, 220 pounds, Malachi Flynn obviously is going to have a challenging part of his game, is going to be keeping guys in front of him because of his physical size. We saw that with Jimmy Butler, just abusing his size and taking Malachi Flynn to the paint, and drawing those fouls as well. So those are just some of the things he's going to have to work through. I do want to emphasize, though, although he has limited size, guys, there is still a need in this league for point guards. And the reason I say this, because people are quick to point out, well, he doesn't fit in with our 6'8", 6'9" lineups. He's actually a really good one-on-one defender. He is. When you watch some of the games, look at the job he did on James Harden in again, limited possessions in the playoffs last year. And again, even Trae Young, some of those foul calls were absolutely bogus, but you need some of these shorter guys to keep up with some of the other shorter guys. And let me give you an example before people say otherwise. Think of the Raptors when they started the 6'8", 6'9" movement. What were a lot of people saying? We don't need a center. We don't need a 7-foot center yet. Look at the difference it makes in having someone like a Christian Koloko. Now, obviously, you have to have the right center. Don't get me wrong. That's not to say you can sign any 7-foot center, but you obviously need a center for several purposes. And you see what Christian Koloko is doing, and also just how much of an impact he's having positively on the Raptors defense as well. And I think it's the same thing now, because it went from we don't need centers in the league. I mean, technically you do, because there's always going to be guys like Joel Embiid. There's always going to be guys like Nikola Jokic. Although Nikola Jokic, I believe he's not 7 feet, he's still close to a traditional big man, but he's able to play the modern game perfectly. That's why you're going to need bigger bodies out there. And it's the same with some of these shorter guys as well. Take, for example, Tyrese Maxey. No one on the Raptors was able to stop him. I know people are going to be quick to point out, well, we had Fred VanVleet, who's a short point guard. What was his excuse? Now, I'm not making excuses for Fred VanVleet's defense last year, had his knee injury, whatever the case was. But you also need quicker guards to guard quicker guys like Trae Young and Tyrese Maxey, or else they're just going to torture your 6'8", 6'9" guys. Take, for example, someone like Precious Achiuwa. He can definitely guard multiple players, but to say that he can be able to keep up with someone like a Tyrese Maxey, his speed, and it's just not going to happen, guys. There's certain limitations to human bodies, and no matter how much you try to define this awesome wingspan of 6'8", 6'9" guys, there's some limitations as to how quick they're able to move their feet, how they're able to shift their hips a little bit, and not a lot of people talk about that. But there's certain aspects to the defensive side of their limitations of being able to. That's why sometimes when you see guys like Pascal and Scottie Barnes, they get blown by smaller guys because of that speed. And that's why one of the reasons, when you take a look at, obviously Marc Gasol was slower, but when you take a look at what the Boston Celtics did in the bubble to Marc Gasol, it's just put a small point guard on him, put a faster point guard on him, and just have him blow by. So again, same thing. You need the shorter point guards for a reason. So I will say this, guys, but one thing I do want to say before I end my video here, guys, is patience with the young players, because I'm seeing so much of it. We saw it last year with Malachi Flynn, but he's no superstar. So he's obviously going to take time to develop. And we're seeing it with some of the other guys as well. A lot of impatience, a lot of recency bias, which I'm totally against. And I stated this last year when we talked about Malachi Flynn having a down year. It wasn't so much that he was having a down year. In fact, when you take a look at his statistics, he was averaging less minutes a game. He was shooting the ball a lot better from the field, although not by that much. And his 3-point percentage was better as well. Now, his free throw percentage did dip a little. Obviously, the numbers dipped across, but I did state that it's because of the inconsistent minutes. It's not so that he's a bad player. It's just you need to have patience with young players. And as I've always stated, again, I could sit here and tell you that Malachi Flynn deserves more minutes. I've always stated this, that it's going to take time to develop guys, but also because we don't see a lot of the things that happens in practices. So maybe he was playing a certain style of play that Nick Nurse didn't want him to play, but we don't know. Again, let's hope that Malachi Flynn continues to get minutes, and let's hope that us as fans, we become a little bit smarter and stop with the recency bias. We're seeing so much of hate towards Fred VanVleet. We're seeing so much hate towards Scottie Barnes because he isn't the crazy superstar that everyone expected to be in the second year. It takes time to develop guys. We need patience. They're human beings. They have up and down seasons. They have up and down games. A stretch of 5-10 games where they may struggle. Again, there's so much going on, guys. They're human beings. They have personal lives. We don't know what's going on through their personal lives as well. So be a little bit patient with the young guys. Give them some minutes. If you're Nick Nurse, I know I said that you don't see a lot of this stuff behind practices, but Nick Nurse does need to preach a little bit of patience with the young guys like Delano Banton, like Malachi Flynn. You need to let them play through their mistakes to develop. That's the whole point of developing players. And I think as much as I love Nick Nurse, and this isn't a knock on him, he's great in a lot of ways. But one of the biggest issues I have with him is, unfortunately, he's really competitive. We know that, and winning the championship just put him that much higher in terms of being competitive. But he needs to let some of the younger guys develop. The Raptors, with all due respect, are not winning the championship this season. So why not let some of the younger guys make some mistakes? Let them develop a little bit. In fact, I think Malachi Flynn and Delano Banton could be perfect off of the bench together. Malachi Flynn, something he doesn't do so well is passing as well as Delano Banton, whereas something that Delano Banton doesn't do as good as Malachi Flynn is shooting. So they complement each other's game. Much like how we saw with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. Have something like that. If Malachi Flynn struggles to guard the other point guards, have a bigger point guard right beside him and Delano Banton. You can switch on to other guys. So I think they would be a really good duo coming off the bench. But again, that's for Nick Nurse to say. I'm not a head coach and I'm making YouTube videos for a reason. I always have stated this. But I do want to hear your thoughts. What are your thoughts on Malachi Flynn? Do you think he needs more consistent minutes? Do you think he should be traded? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. And as always, I do have a trivia question for you today. And that trivia question is, which player leads the NBA in three-point percentage? Now, if anyone has been following the Raptors lately, you should absolutely know this answer. But is it A, Josh Green? Is it B, Steph Curry? Is it C, Yuta Watanabe? Is it D, Trae Young? So whoever answers this trivia question correctly first in the comment section gets a shout out in my next video. So that will be it for today's video, guys. So make sure to hit the subscribe button if you're still watching. Your support, as always, is very much appreciated. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.